Can they? And if they can, how can they affect a human being?
So they absolutely can affect a human being. And there are several ayat of the Quran which tell us about them affecting people and how that might happen. People can be divided into two types. There are some who are just fraudsters, who are just, like it's all just trickery and sleight of hand, and they find out about their audience beforehand, and they ask deliberate question to someone in seat number 25 who is prepped to answer. What happened was that Sulaiman alayhi salam, he passed away. And remember, he had many of the jinn that worked for him. Allah, one of the things that he gave to Sulaiman, that Allah gave to Sulaiman that was unique to him, is that he had a control over the shayateen and the jinn, those who worked for him. And when he died, he died and he was simply leaning on his stick until something like a termite or an insect from the earth had been chewing at the stick, and he fell down. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Allah told us that if it were the case that the jinn knew the unseen, they wouldn't have remained in this humiliating torment that they did, because they didn't even know that he had passed away. Definitely. And you can see, to be honest, if you look at the people who are famous for this in the world today, like famous magicians, famous fortune tellers and so on, you can see from them how they interact with the jinn. It's very clear. In fact, it doesn't need to be any conspiracy or any sort of hidden information. You can actually just clearly see it, as clear as day. You can see the way that they're interacting with the jinn. Young kids, we had a case of some young kids over in Dubai, and those young kids went to a haunted house, and they really came out really unwell. They came out with mental health issues. They came out with really troubled, severely sick and unwell. And they just went because a bunch of young kids who just seen so many stories on YouTube and we should go, and they snuck in, and
you shouldn't go searching for it.
Don't go searching for the jinn and the shaitan. How many people have had multiple cases in front of me,
etc. What message would you?
I think I would start with something really simple. If you remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is khaliqu kulli shay, He created everything, and Allah created therefore the jinn. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything that they do. And Allah is ala kulli shay'in qadir, able to do all things. That on its own gives you so much confidence that, how is it ever possible that the jinn and the shayateen could overcome the command of Allah? It could never happen, right? There are some simple steps that people need to take. Just start from the beginning. Don't say, I've been there, I've read Quran, I've been to the Sheikh, I did. Because everybody says that. Start from zero and start with just attaching the heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
إنك لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, it's John Fontain. Just before we begin the podcast, please make sure you click subscribe and also set your notifications. And make sure you check out the earlier podcasts. We're up to around 40 podcasts so far. There's lots of podcasts there for you to benefit from. Make sure you check that out. Also, if you can go to the John Fontain YouTube channel as well, click subscribe, set your notifications, and also enjoy the other videos. There's a Fiqh of Love series, a series on Christianity, and other videos regarding Dawah. Also, if you'd like to support the podcast by supporting us financially, with the equipment and the travel costs and the running costs, not just of the podcast but also the other Dawah activities I'm involved in, please support on the Patreon account. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the Young Smirks podcast. Today I'm joined with Sheikh Tim Humble. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
How are you doing? I'm very well, thank you.
Good to see you again.
Fantastic to see you.
Alhamdulillah.
In a different setting from last time.
I know, alhamdulillah, we're outside. And alhamdulillah, getting some fresh air.
It's absolutely fantastic.
How's the lockdown been?
It's not been too bad, alhamdulillah. I think whenever you find a door is closed to you through some means, another one opens up by the grace of Allah, al-Fatah. So alhamdulillah, we found a lot of opportunities to change things, do things a bit differently, but I'm very, very happy now the masjid is open. At least we can go to the masjid.
Alhamdulillah.
That was a big thing.
Yeah, subhanAllah, it's not easy, subhanAllah.
No.
I remember the first time I went to the masjid after lockdown, it just felt amazing. It felt like Ramadan, you know.
I know,
just
completely. It was, that was the biggest thing that I missed. The rest of it I could manage, being at home. Generally I'm at home anyway, so it wasn't too difficult, but not being able to go to the masjid, that was that was a little tough.
Yeah. Sheikh, I know you've got a lot of content online, written content, also videos about Ruqya.
Yes.
But this is something I particularly wanted to ask you personally.
Okay.
And kind of, the last podcast, we kind of touched upon it, but I want to go into a bit of detail.
Okay, no problem.
Not just from a kind of protection Islamic perspective, but I actually think it is actually also possible way of dawah personally, because like non-Muslims generally, a lot of them do actually believe in the unseen world.
That's true.
And it's just kind of giving them an Islamic perspective of that unseen world. So first of all, maybe we can just speak about the Islamic perspective of like the world of the unseen, the jinn, magic, sihr and things like this.
So I think it's really important to note that in Islam, one of the most fundamental things that makes us who we are is our belief in the ghaib. So right at the very beginning of the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah Azza wa Jal said, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. When He's describing the successful people and describing the Muslims in the very first few verses after Surah Al-Fatiha. So He describes one of the main features of those successful people is that they believe in the unseen. And the word ghaib is used for everything which is unseen to us. We can't see it, we can't test for it, we can't use any sort of equipment to perceive it or to view it. Is something that's hidden from us. And so in all honesty, a lot of things come under that. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes under generally the topic of the ghaib, because believing in Allah is believing in the unseen. Likewise, paradise and hellfire, the grave and the punishment of the grave, and the world of the angels, and the world also of the jinn. So it's really, really important for us that we believe in things which are unseen. And that is something which, I mean, even if you look at atheism, right? When people talk about atheism, what's the major thing that comes up all the time? This thing about, the fact that you guys believe in things that are not seen, that are not, within the realm of the world of science, for example. And one of the things that broadly speaking fits into the unseen is the world of the jinn. And the jinn are a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They share some traits with us and they differ with us in some things. So they share the trait that they have al-aql, they have intellect, and they have free will and choice to do good or to do bad. But they differ with us in the sense that we can't see them. They inhabit a world that is unseen to us. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about them, إِنَّهُ يَرَاكُمْ هُوَ وَقَبِيلُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا تَرَوْنَهُم. That He and His tribe see you from where you don't see them. So they have similarities with us in the sense they have free will. They have a choice to be from the people of paradise, the people of hellfire. And at the same time, they also differ from us in the sense that they inhabit an unseen world. It's really important when we talk about them, though, that we ground, because it's from the ghaib, that we base our discussion about them around the Quran and the Sunnah. Because when you go off that topic, obviously people, I mean, how many people make videos, right? Paranormal videos, ghost videos, and haunted houses and all that type of stuff. It's really, really important that we ground ourselves on the Quran and the Sunnah and what the early generations agreed upon. And there's no harm in mentioning experience, but I think whenever I mention something from experience, I always try and flag it and say to you, this is my experience, but there might not be an evidence for that one way or the other.
So this kind of spiritual world of jinn, like obviously we have this physical human world which we're aware of. So the jinn are around us, right? So there's like jinn, like here now.
Because we don't perceive them and we don't see them, it's difficult for us to really be able to say with any great conviction about certain things about where they are, and because of course we don't see them. But one of the things that we know is that, for example, all of us have with us a qareen, and the qareen is from the jinn, and it's it is from among the shayateen, from among the shaitan, that tells you to do wrong and encourages you to do wrong. And that's mentioned in various places in the Quran, in Surah Qaf, for example. قَالَ قَرِينُهُ رَبَّنَا مَا أَطْغَيْتُهُ. The qareen will say, my Lord, I didn't cause him to go into this transgression. وَلَكِنْ كَانَ فِي ضَلَالٍ بَعِيدٍ. But he was far astray. So this is something which is mentioned also. So in that sense, yeah, this whole world we have, the world of the angels we talk about, we don't perceive it at the end of the day, but every one of us has an angel on the right and an angel on the left. Every one of us have angels that prevent certain things from happening to us. So ultimately, this is something we don't see. It's from the world that we don't see.
So of course, this is one of the pillars of Iman, to believe in the unseen world, specifically the angels, which obviously you can put the jinn with that as well.
Yeah.
So as a Muslim, we have to believe in these creatures, these creations, right?
Absolutely. And the fact that they're mentioned in the Quran in quite a lot of detail means it's not something which is found in a rare book. It's not something where you have to delve into a rare book of hadith somewhere to find. You can find information about them. For example, there's an entire surah of the Quran, Surah Al-Jinn, which tells us about them and tells us about what they do, a little bit about some of the history behind them, and so on. And likewise, the end of Surah Al-Ahqaf as well tells us about a group of the jinn that listened to the Quran from the Prophet ﷺ. So these are things that you can find just by looking at the Quran. It's not something where you have to sort of go very far away, or it's kind of specialist knowledge that only a few people know about. It's something that's actually very clear there for us in the Quran to pay attention to.
So, I mean, we have, I mentioned this to you last time, of course, we're living in a time where mental health is an issue, and also we're getting a lot of issues with people who may or may not be affected with jinn. So how can these jinn, can they, and if they can, how can they affect a human being?
So they absolutely can affect a human being. And there are several ayat of the Quran which tell us about them affecting people and how that might happen. For example, if we categorize the way that they affect people into different categories, there is one which is just simple possession, and this is mentioned, for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah. الذين يأكلون الربا لا يقومون إلا كما يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان من المس. Those who devour riba will stand on the Day of Judgment like the one who is possessed by the shaitan, driving him into insanity. So this concept of mess, of being touched by the shaitan, is something that it was known to the Arabs prior to the coming of Islam, and it was affirmed and confirmed by the Quran and within the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ as well. Then you have also the issue of magic, sihr, and this is something which the jinn can have an involvement, but it also is something a little more complex than that, because here you have someone who is, if you like, manipulating them or using them as part of this sihr, this magic, in order to cause harm to someone. This is also mentioned to us in Surah Al-Baqarah. Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned in ayah number 102, which is a long passage of the Quran, nearly half a page, regarding Sulaiman and what Sulaiman was accused of, because of course Sulaiman was accused, alayhi salam, of performing magic, and that wasn't actually true. He was, of course, as a prophet, he would not have been anywhere near anything like that, but they accused him of it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. It wasn't Sulaiman who disbelieved, but it was the shayateen who disbelieved. يُعَلِّمُونَ النَّاسِ السِّحْرَ. They teach the people magic. And one of the things we can take from this ayah, this first part, is that sihr is something which is learned, something which is taught, because he said يُعَلِّمُونَ النَّاسِ السِّحْرَ. They taught the people. So it's not like, people read sort of, I don't know, the Harry Potter kind of, the way it's presented, that someone just wakes up one day and they just realize that, this is I have these different supernatural gifts and powers. But it's not actually the case. It's actually something that people learn, and it's something that people cause a lot of harm to other people with. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he described it as kufr, as disbelief. And so he said, وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. The shayateen, the devils, they disbelieved. And likewise, he told us about it. فَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. They learn from them what causes a husband and wife to break apart. So it's something which has very real effects, and that also tells us that there is no such thing as white magic or good magic, or like they talk about traditional magic, things like that, where people talk about, we're using these effects for good or something like that. That doesn't exist. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَقَدْ عَلِمُوا لَمَنِ اشْتَرَاهُ مَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَقٍ. That the one who purchases this is not going to have any share in the hereafter. So from all of these things we learned that it's something which is learnt, that it's something which has very real effects upon people, that is something that involves the jinn and the shayateen, that it is something that doesn't have a positive side or a good side, it can never be used for good, and it's something which constitutes disbelief in Islam. So that's that aspect. The third aspect that we often look at is the issue of al-ayn, of the evil eye. This is also mentioned in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about the disbelievers who would always make you لَيُزْلَقُونَكَ بِأَبْصَارِهِم. They would almost make you fall over or slip through their eyes. لَمَّا سَمِعُوا الذِّكْرَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned regarding in Surah Al-Falaq, مِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ, from the evil of the jealous person when they have jealousy. So these are all things which are mentioned to us in the Quran, and the Sunnah expands upon that, gives much more information about them. And each one of them could have a relation to the jinn in one way or another, but the evil eye, perhaps we could make it more of a separate category, because it doesn't have to necessarily involve the jinn.
Right.
That's what it appears to me, that it doesn't necessarily have to involve them. As for jinn possession and magic, those two require or are more likely to involve the jinn or the shayateen.
Subhanallah. So this kind of, you get people who are dealing with this unseen world, people who are dealing with the jinn. Not only people, you get people who even may claim to be Muslim. They look like Muslims, they have the robes and the hat and everything. I've witnessed this in Africa. But you also have like non-Muslims. So what's common these days, and it's more common than we think, subhanAllah, you have in the newspapers, you have like horoscopes, you have mediums,
healers.
Healers. Not only that, even like, and I'm not just talking about like these kind of people from abroad, right? You have like mediums, like what are filling like stadiums. In Manchester we have the MEN Arena, big stadium, holds around maybe 50,000 people, and they'll have like a medium come, and they're claiming to actually contact dead people, maybe your uncle or your cat or your dog, or but in fact, do you think these people actually also dealing with the jinn? Or?
I think these type of people can be divided into two types. There are some who are just fraudsters, who are just like it's all just trickery and sleight of hand, and they find out about their audience beforehand, and they ask deliberate question to someone in seat number 25 who is prepped to answer. That does happen. And we've seen some really funny stories of that, to be honest. It's obviously not something which could ever be justified in Islam or allowed in Islam. But there are some stories which are, when you hear about what the extent to which they will go to actually, sort of present these falsehoods to people, it's amazing. People with briefcases with false bottoms in them, and then they're telling people that the jinn took their money, and in reality it's just... just people doing all sorts of tricks. Someone who's levitating, but he's just got a little sort of a stick underneath him that winds him up and winds him down. All of these things they really do exist. And likewise, you can go to certain fortune tellers who just will look at you and say, I think you're troubled, and then they're just very, very good at getting you to talk. And you're like, actually, I do feel troubled. Like, and they just sort of look at the the tea leaves or all of this category of people are literally copying the people who really do this, but they're just basically faking it. And the next category are those who do it for real, and that's something which is really, really concerning, because the Prophet ﷺ, he spoke about this, and he told us that whoever goes to a kahin or a arraf, someone who tells you where your lost things are, or goes to a fortune teller or a sorcerer, فَقَدْ كَفَرَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ, this person has disbelieved in what was revealed to Muhammad. So in Islam, we're absolutely prohibited from anything like that, whether it's from the point of view of trickery or the point of view of real sort of seeking help from the jinn and so on. Some of them, the arraf for example, they specialize in telling you where your lost things are. You go and say, I lost my keys, or I lost my my car, or something like that, and they actually seek the help of the jinn, and they they perform acts of worship to other than Allah, and they worship the jinn, they call upon them, they seek their help, and then from that they gain information. Not that the jinn have that information themselves, because for example, when Sulaiman died, Sulaiman had died, and all of them. وَلَقَدْ تَبَيَّنَتِ الْجِنُّ أَنْ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ الْغَيْبَ لَبِثُوا فِي الْعَذَابِ.
Tell us what happened with this instance, because people might not be familiar with it.
So what happened was that Sulaiman alayhi salam, he passed away, And remember, he had many of the jinn that worked for him. Allah, one of the things that he gave to Sulaiman, that Allah gave to Sulaiman that was unique to him, is that he had a control over the shayateen and the jinn, those who worked for him. And when he died, he died and he was simply leaning on his stick until something like a termite or an insect from the earth had been chewing at the stick, and he fell down. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Allah told us that if it were the case that the jinn knew the unseen, they wouldn't have remained in humiliating torment that they did, because they didn't even know that he had passed away. You know, so we should avoid this idea of thinking that they know the unseen and they know everything. But of course, you know, they pass information quickly between each other, and we have a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ tells us about how they climb on top of each other to reach up to the heavens, and they, you know, one of them on top of the other, and they try to just steal a word, just a little piece of information. Then the flaming fireball, it strikes at them, and perhaps it would hit them before they pass the information on, and perhaps it will hit them after they pass the information on. Finally, they take it down to the sorcerer or the fortune teller, who mixes with it 100 lies. So you see, the fortune teller is believed because of one single truth that is heard from, that was heard from the angels. So it's something that it's we have to be against it.
Even like you say, these kind of mediums or fortune tellers, sometimes the jinn can like move something in the physical world, and it gives, obviously for us, it's like amazing, because we can't see it, right? We can't see how that is doing it, but in reality it's a trick, because it's a part of the unseen. It's nothing that special. It's not like this fortune teller has like powers or anything.
Yeah, definitely. And you can see, to be honest, if you look at the people who are famous for this in the world today, like famous magicians, famous fortune tellers and so on, you can see from them how they interact with the jinn. It's very clear. In fact, it doesn't need to be any conspiracy or any sort of like, you know, hidden information. You can actually just clearly see it, as clear as day. You can see the way that they're interacting with the jinn, the way that they describe their general life, the sort of signs of worship they have to like devil worship and stuff that they put upon themselves and things like that, and the way they describe their method of learning and so on. It's very, very clear that, and a lot of people might think that a lot of these stage performers are just fraudsters and tricksters and so on, but it's not the case. A lot of them are seeking help from the jinn. It's a very, very troubling situation, especially when we've got young guys and young brothers and sisters who are actually watching them and following them online, watching their videos. And you know, at the end of the day, there is a hadith which indicates that the person who watches them for entertainment, his salah will not be accepted for 40 days. And whoever believes in them, then that person has disbelieved in what was revealed to Muhammad ﷺ. So it's very, very, very serious.
SubhanAllah. You know, of course, within our deen, our religion of Islam, Allah has told us ways of protecting ourselves. But what I'm finding is this past few weeks, SubhanAllah, this is why I wanted to do specifically speak about this topic, is people have come to me saying they've had this issue, that issue, and they've been to a so-called Raqi or a Sheikh, and they've said, and the Sheikh has asked them for their name, their mother's name, and this kind of alarm bell started ringing, because obviously I was familiar with your work on this, and again I've heard you say before that this is kind of, you know, a sign that they're not doing the right thing, and I asked the person, I said, was this person contacting the jinn? And he said yes. So I wanted to kind of run this by you. Is this permissible for someone to contact the jinn?
No, and we know that Allah Azza wa Jal spoke about it very severely. For example, in Surah Al-An'am, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He spoke about on the day when Allah will gather all of the people together. Ya ma'shar al-jinn qad istakthartum min al-ins. O group of jinn, you have really abused mankind. You have really, you've frequently been interacting with each other. And their awliya from among the men, they will say, رَبَّنَا اسْتَمْتَعَ بَعْضُنَا بِبَعْضٍ. O our Lord, we benefited, some of us, from each other, and we had a relationship where we were benefiting from them and they were benefiting from us. وَبَلَغْنَا أَجَلَنَا الَّذِي أَجَّلْتَ لَنَا. And we have reached our time that you've appointed for us. قَالَ النَّارِ. He said, the fire will be your abode. and you'll be in it forever. That is a very severe warning against any kind of interaction with the jinn. And that's why we're not permitted to interact with them at all. And a lot of people, you see, you have different people. You have, in terms of the people who pretend to be, for example, a raqi or a healer in this from among the Muslims. You have different sort of people. Among them you have those who really have been confused and they really believe that their interaction with the Muslim jinn is something permissible. And perhaps even they think they're talking to angels. I've seen people who will say this, you know, this is I have an angel who comes to me and gives me these things. Yet the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ, by the one whose hand my soul is in. لو أنكم تدومون على ما تكونون عندي وفي الذكر, if you remained in the state you are with me and in the state of remembrance that you have with me, لصافحتكم الملائكة, the angels would shake your hands. في فرشكم وعلى طرقكم أو كما قال, he said that they would shake your hands on your beds and in your roads. This indicates that doesn't happen. I mean, he's saying that, did any of you see the angels shake your hand? Did any of you see the angels come and see? The angels don't do that. And so these people have been tricked and fooled into actually dealing with the jinn and the shayateen and thinking that those jinn and shayateen are angels. And even if you ask them, okay, what do you do to bring this angel? They say, I sacrifice an animal and I spill the blood, or I make sajda to a stone or to a rock. Which angel comes to you when you make sajda to a stone? Which angel comes to you when you sacrifice an animal to other than Allah? It's not an angel, it's a jinn.
And of course, angels, they can't disobey Allah, right?
They don't disobey Allah.
Only the humans and the jinn have this.
وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ, they don't disobey Allah, what He commanded them, and they do what they've been commanded. So it's something which is, some people are fooled like that. Others know what they're doing, but they have taken it as a means to earn money, a means to become sort of, to gain some degree of power over people, influence over people, to, you know, sort of to gain some sort of reputation in society. So there's different reasons why people do it, but ultimately we, first of all, the biggest solution to this is for people to learn how to treat themselves, first of all. But even that, when you go to someone that you are absolutely certain of their belief and the way that they treat people, and you avoid anyone giving out ta'weed, amulets, anyone who is saying ineligible, sort of unintelligible words, like strange words that you don't understand, anyone who asks you to do weird things, haram things, anyone who asks you to bring an animal to sacrifice, or anyone who asks you to bring an item of clothing, or anyone who asks for your mother's name, or asks for, you know, personal information or photo of you or of your children, anything in that regard, all of that is just another example of magic. Whether the person really knows what they're doing or whether the person thinks they're communicating with the angel, doesn't matter to me. Ultimately what they're doing is they're worshipping the jinn, they're performing magic.
So you made that point in the beginning, the importance of coming back to the Quran and the Sunnah. You know, you said, yes, we do have like experiences, you know, which may, you know, you have to take it with a certain pinch of salt.
Absolutely.
Really. But when we come back to the Quran and the Sunnah, you can't go wrong. You know, you may have your trusted Sheikh at the mosque or whoever, but the bottom line is that where's the evidence for what you're doing? You know, you have to go back to the trusted sources, right?
Absolutely, because ultimately this is from the, as we said in the beginning, it's from the ghaib, right? It's from the unseen, and nobody knows the reality of that unseen except Allah. So ultimately we don't have a way to even manage it. Like, where do I even start from? And really there's only two sources of information about this kind of thing. There's either an authentic source, which is the Quran and the Sunnah, what the scholars of Islam have agreed upon, and there are sources which are basically from the jinn and the shayateen, and just, you know, people who've learned from them. So you have to ask yourself, on which side do you fall, and where are you going to learn from at the end of the day? And so if a person wants to protect himself, ultimately any kind of seeking help from the jinn, it doesn't actually protect the person at all. And that's why you see these people get amulets. They go and get an amulet. For a couple of weeks they feel better. Then they go even worse than they did before. Because Allah told us the shaitan will never keep his promise. وَوَعَدْتُكُمْ فَأَخْلَفْتُكُمْ, I promised you and I broke my promise. So you have to understand that Allah's promise is true, and that Allah Azza wa Jal will always guide you to what is best for you and will give you the treatments best for you, and that includes treatment to cure you from the problems you are going through, the issues of the jinn, magic and so on. But going to the jinn and the shaitan to try and make some kind of agreement or pact, ultimately that's only going to bring sadness upon a person, and it's only going to cause them to get even more sick and even worse in their situation. Even if they feel like they got better for a short time, in the long run, and especially when you think about after they die, the situation is not going to be like that.
You know, an interesting thing which I took from yourself was that although Allah gives us like ways to protect ourselves and cure ourselves, etc., one thing you mentioned as well was the importance of having the correct belief in the first place. Because although, yes, we're Muslim, if you have like kind of the wrong belief, this is kind of leaving you open to, you know, these type of things, right?
Definitely. And just one ayah, which just, for me, just explains this beautifully, is the ayah in Surah Al-An'am when Allah said, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يَلْبِسُوا إِيمَانَهُمْ بِظُلْمٍ أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْأَمْنُ وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. Those people who believe and haven't mixed up their belief with polytheism, it is they who will be safe, and it is they who will be guided. So Allah promised safety, and He didn't specify the kind of safety. Are we talking about safety in the hereafter? Are we talking about safety in the safety from what kind of? Because it's general, it's for everything. If you want to be safe and you want to be protected, the very first thing you have to start with is the right belief. And that's why when you see somebody who doesn't have that, whether they're from the Muslims who've got mistakes in their belief, or whether they're from people coming from outside, you see that the jinn and the shayateen have so much control over them, so much control. And that's mentioned many times in the Quran. The statement of Iblis, which Allah Azza wa Jal told us about in the Quran, when Iblis said, وَمَا كَانَ لِي عَلَيْكُم مِّن سُلْطَانٍ, I didn't have any authority over you. And when Allah Azza wa Jal said about him, إِنَّ عِبَادِي لَيْسَ لَكَ عَلَيْهِمْ سُلْطَانٍ, my servants, you don't have any authority over them. But in other parts of the Quran, Allah mentioned, إِلَّا مَنِ اتَّبَعَكَ مِنَ الْغَاوِينَ, except the sinners and the disobedient ones who followed you. So it's clear that the person with the right belief, the right mindset, that person from the beginning has a degree of protection. Add to that further that if they were to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and be strict upon it, that's a further protection. Because
you know, I mean, it's not always, but a lot of the time you find, not all the time, but a lot of the time you find that most of the people are not actually praying their salah on time, or even praying at all, and these are the people that are more likely.
Definitely, because if you look at on the topic, for example, just on the topic of following the sunnah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَلْيَحْذَرِ الَّذِينَ يُخَالِفُونَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِ أَن تُصِيبَهُمْ فِتْنَةٌ أَوْ يُصِيبَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. That let them take a warning, those people who go against His command, lest they be tried by a trial or a painful punishment. So what protects you from being put to trial and suffering trials and tribulations in your life is following the commands of the Prophet ﷺ. On top of that, in terms of the prayer, we know that the prayer is a major means of protection. Whoever prays Fajr in the Jama'ah is in the dhimma of Allah, that Allah has guaranteed their protection hatta yumsi, until the evening comes, just for praying Fajr in the Jama'ah. But how many people we see, not only they're going to maybe dubious people, taking all kinds of dubious things, all ta'weed and strange amulets and things written for them, and on top of that they're not praying Fajr in the Jama'ah. They're not doing the adhkar in the morning and the evening and after every prayer and before they go to sleep. They're not following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Their belief has issues within it. And you know, if you look at all that, when you put all that together, it just shows that the person is doing almost everything wrong. You know, it's the wrong way of approaching it. Turn it around and start by correcting the belief, following the sunnah, praying the prayer on time, at-taqwa, because ultimately even the word taqwa is a shield and a barrier. So protection through taqwa, through obeying Allah as much as they can, avoiding disobedience as much as they can. And then on top of that, a person then follows the means to gain a cure through ruqya, recitation of the Quran, through the various different things they can do. Allah, this person inshallah will be far, far stronger than the one who is going here and there to different people and using all kinds of forbidden kinds of cures.
So what are some of the well-known ways of protection from the Quran and the Sunnah?
So we spoke about protection on a general level, right? We spoke about protection in terms of your belief, your following of the Sunnah, your taqwa. So now let's talk about something specific. So in terms of protection, a lot of people go wrong when they think about ruqya, because ruqya really is a cure rather than a protection. Really,
right.
In most cases, there isn't a lot of examples of using ruqya as a preventative measure. Right. The more of the examples are actually using it as a cure when a person has become sick. In terms of preventative measures, what you generally have is you have the adhkar, the dhikr, which, for example, the dhikr of the morning and the evening, adhkar al-sabah wal-masa. This could be you read after Fajr and after Asr prayer. And if you have, for example, I would recommend everyone watching, if you can get a copy of Fortress of the Muslim, Hisnul Muslim, very small book, beautiful book.
Sheikh, this book was a means for me finding Islam.
It's such an amazing book.
SubhanAllah, my brother gave me this book, and SubhanAllah, I was just reading it.
And it's just a book of adhkar, right? Supplications, different. So in there you'll find a chapter called Remembrances for Morning and Evening. So after Fajr, after Asr, before you go to sleep, after the 5 daily prayers, when you do your astaghfirullah, 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 you do subhanallah, alhamdulillah, and so on, Allahu Akbar, and so on. You read Ayatul Kursi after your prayers. Before you go to sleep, there's another section in Hisnul Muslim, what to read before you go to sleep. Anytime when you're in a situation where you might be vulnerable to the jinn or the shayateen, like for example going into the bathroom. So what do we say when we go into the bathroom? Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubuthi wal khaba'ith. This al-khubuthi wal khaba'ith, many of the scholars said this means the male and female jinn. So you're asking Allah's protection from the male and female jinn, because this is a place where there is a concern or a danger. Likewise, that a person, before they engage in marital intimacy, for example, they say, Allahumma jannibna ash-shaytan wa jannib ash-shaytan ma razaqtana. Oh Allah, keep the shaitan away from us and keep the shaitan away from what you provide for us. And that just shows you that that is another situation where a person might be vulnerable to the influence of the shaitan. So Islam has all these different means of protection, along with the general means of protection, your belief, your following the sunnah, your taqwa, your prayers. Those are fantastic. Then there are even more specific things, like for example eating 7 ajwa dates from Aliyatul Medina. Now these dates, there's different narrations and wordings. So there's narration of the word ajwa, and some of the scholars said ajwa are the type that we have today, you know, the little ajwa dates. And some of them said no, the word ajwa just means a really good quality of date. And some of the narrations mention min Aliyatul Medina, from a place in Medina called Al-Aliyah. And some of them just mention dates of Medina, and some of them mention dates, but you eat 7 of them. So what we would say is, if you can get ajwa dates from Medina, alhamdulillah, that's amazing. From Al-Aliyah, that's amazing. If you can't, just get any Medina dates. If you can't get any dates, inshallah, take 7 in the morning before you eat anything else. That whoever starts the morning with 7 tamarat ajwa, 7 ajwa dates, will not be harmed by poison or magic on that day. SubhanAllah, means of protection. You know, means of protection.
SubhanAllah.
So many different things. Then you go into the next stage, which is the issue of the cure itself. Like if somebody does feel that they're affected, because even though I said ruqya is mostly as a cure, but it could also be used as a diagnostic tool as well. Like for someone who doesn't know whether they've got something wrong with them. Like, you know, you see now when someone feels like they've got something wrong, there's so much panic and people say, what shall I do? And I went to this. And I've seen most cases, a lot of the time, the person might not have actually had anything wrong with them at the beginning, but because they went, after they thought they had something wrong with them, they went to Sheikh so-and-so and Sheikh so-and-so, they actually ended up getting the problem from the Sheikh that they went to, not from the actual, not from the original thing that they had, might not have actually been something genuinely wrong with them.
So then they got sick afterwards.
But they got sick afterwards. Or what was wrong with them was very small. Like it was a small amount of ayn or a small amount of mess that could have been removed by the permission of Allah very easily, even just at home with them by their own recitation. But instead, when they went to that sheikh, the sheikh basically, it's like a dodgy mechanic. You know, like if there's nothing wrong with your car, they'll break something and make something wrong with your car. So that's how it is. These people, you go to them, you say, Sheikh, you know, I think I've got an affliction. It's okay. Well, if you don't have one, I'll make sure you have one by the time you leave, and then I'll sell you the cure. You know, so that's how these people work.
SubhanAllah, it's very sad. So a lot of the time it is, as you said, for financial benefit of the dunya, but again, sometimes it's just literally to misguide people, draw them into shirk.
Yeah, it's true. You can't guarantee that. You can't say to somebody that it's just the financial aspect, because there might be genuine people who do take some kind of financial payment. I mean, I'm not a great fan of it, but at the end of the day, I don't believe it to be outright haram. So that's one aspect. And on the other side, there are even some people who are doing magic and so on and seeking help from the jinn who actually are not taking money from people. It's quite rare, but you do see them. They'll just come and say, you know, no, I'm just healing people, but their goal is just to take people away from the path of Allah. And it's really interesting, because what you mentioned about that is because one of the really interesting things we can learn is that for a magician to continue to be able to use the jinn, they have to be able to provide something more than just their own misguidance. So in the beginning, you know, people say he sold his soul to the devil, right? And that's true. But actually, once you've sold your soul, what happens? You don't have another one to sell, right? So you've already gone. So the shaitan said, what shall I do? There's no point. There's nothing you can do for me. You have to bring me somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. And the only way they can continue to perform that magic is by bringing more and more and more people.
And human shayateen are like this as well, aren't they? Like they're not content with just doing the crime themselves. They want their friends and they want to drag more people in.
And that's why Allah said, shayateen al-insi wal-jinn yuhi ba'duhum ila ba'dhin zukhruf al-qawli ghurura. Shaitan from the jinn and the men. Each of them inspire each other with false speech in terms of adornment. They adorn their speech in falsehood. SubhanAllah, you think about the shayateen from the human beings. That's why the magician is considered to be that example of the shaitan from the human beings, because they're cooperating with the shayateen of the jinn.
So I guess you know, all these type of things like ghosts, spirits, what non-Muslims might refer to as ghosts and spirits, they're not like the souls of dead people.
No,
they are actually a separate creation.
Yeah,
like
a separate creation. But that doesn't mean that they don't impersonate them, you know. Like, because at the end of the day, if it takes people away from the path of Allah, if it misguides people, so that's what they do.
So they can get this information from other jinns. Oh, this person.
Or even sometimes not even information. It's just just you know, the person is willing to be fooled, right?
Yeah.
The person is sitting there and they're willing to be tricked and willing to be fooled. And then, you know, for example, to give an example of that from the hadith, the time of the Dajjal, when there is a person will come to the Dajjal and the Dajjal will say, if I was to raise your parents alive, would you believe in me? And he will say yes. And so two shayateen will appear in the form of his parents. Because his heart is what he wants to believe it, his mind wants to believe it, and he's not grounded in the Quran and the Sunnah and not protecting himself. Then he said, I'm going to believe, because these two parents come and say, my son, he's your Rabb, he's your Lord.
Yes,
so this is something which is, we have evidence from the hadith. It's not just something that we're talking about from experience. We have clear evidence that this is what they do. They impersonate other people in order to make you, particularly people who are vulnerable or susceptible to believing in that. Whereas if you keep, you know, if you sort of have if you're sort of well-grounded and you don't allow yourself to be carried away by stories and things like that. Like me personally, for all that I talk about this issue and try to study it and try to teach it to people, you don't find many, like I don't really do like jinn stories and you know, stuff like that. It's not something that because I just feel like that's sensationalizing the issue even more, and it's leading people to this issue of following them because of people dramatizing it. And maybe even young kids. We had a case of some young kids over in Dubai, and those young kids went to a haunted house, you know, and they really came out really unwell. You know, they came out with mental health issues. They came out with really troubled, you know, like severely sick and unwell. And they just went because a bunch of young kids who just seen so many stories on YouTube and we should go, and you know, they snuck in and they.
You shouldn't go searching for it.
Don't go searching for the jinn and the shaitan. How many people I've had cases, multiple cases in front of me from the Ouija board, people being silly and playing Ouija boards and you know, calling upon the jinn and thinking it's just a bit of fun among their friends, and then the next time one of them ends up becoming insane or ends up becoming possessed, and they start having all kinds of problems in their family, in their health and all that kind of stuff. And it's a horrible thing to see, you know, when you see someone affected like that. Well, it's like you see people like completely broken, like health wise. They have huge health issues that the doctors can't find the answer to. Psychologically they're scarred. They're very like struggling to even, you know, just even function. Often, you know, severe wiswas in their religion. They're going in and out of the religion, saying they don't believe anymore, things like that. And all of this because somebody just wanted a bit of entertainment with their friends or a bit of silliness with their friends. So we try to avoid that.
You know, you find it's very common, subhanAllah. You know, if you want to get 1 million views on Facebook, just go and speak about jinn stories. But how many people actually come and learn how to actually practically protect themselves and perform ruqyah, things like this, on themselves and their family? See, so important.
There are good people, alhamdulillah, like doing da'wah, who are explaining these things nicely, and sometimes they might have stories to tell, but I think the problem you worry about are the people who speak about it without knowledge, and then they sensationalize it and they make people interested to the point where someone, you know, people will even say, I went and bought books on sihr, you know, books on magic, and started reading
Subhanallah,
and one person recently got in touch with me about this. They got interested in it, they started buying books on it, then they started reading it, then when they read it, they became affected, they became confused, and they started to say, like, I've started seeing, I started these symbols and signs and all that type of stuff.
You know, I seen a dawah book recently. It had been written with the intention of dawah, but there was a lot of research on magic and this, and I didn't have a good feeling about this book personally. I mean, the intention was to kind of show all these different types of misguidances and then present Islam. I just felt, you know, you don't really want to give.
Person has to be careful,
you know,
very careful. And I think whenever even some people said to me, like, when you've explained it before, do you feel like there's a danger in that? And I've always said, like, we've always tried when we explain it to limit it to what is needed for people to realize how wrong it is. So people said, like, for example, when you explained how the people write ta'weez, is that not encouraging people to write it? We say, well, first of all, we don't explain the whole picture. And second of all, it's only enough for a person to realize that it's wrong. And once they can see, like, how they write the mother's name and how they write your name and how they calculate it, and then how they determine whether you're a person of fire or earth or air or water, then they bury the ta'weez, or they hang it in on the wing of a bird or on a tree, or they put it in a well or in other places, and they do all of that is done through a calculation. And when you show that to people, many people take it off and leave it. So that's the purpose behind it, but never ever to give people enough knowledge to actually write one themselves or make one.
And the
themselves.
everyday person doesn't need to know all the finer details of these things. It's
just enough to keep away from
exactly.
it.
It's not a joke. I mean, I know you've had many experiences. I've had many experiences with this, and it's not something. It's not fun. You know, it's not desirable. It's not entertaining. You know, it's a serious thing.
It's really horrible to see, because at the end of the day, if it were just in a movie or a story, you know, that would be something different. But it's someone's real life, right? Like, it's somebody who really goes home every night and can't sleep at night and has, you know, these pains and problems and health issues, and their family are crying over them. It's a real person's life, you know, like, and that's why it's not funny, it's not entertainment.
What message would you have for someone who's, you know, they've been affected by these things, you know, they're feeling depressed, they, you know how it is, they feel like there's no way out, maybe even losing a bit of hope in Allah, etc. What message would you?
I think I would start with something really simple. If you remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is khaliqu kulli shay, He created everything. And Allah created therefore the jinn, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything that they do. And Allah is ala kulli shay'in qadir, able to do all things. That on its own gives you so much confidence that, okay, how is it ever possible that the jinn and the shayateen could overcome the command of Allah? It could never happen, right? And then on top of that, if you think about the Quran, what did Allah say about the Quran? لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله. If we sent this Quran upon a mountain, you would see the mountain collapse into dust out of the fear of Allah. If this is the effect of the Quran upon a mountain, then how about the effect upon a jinn and shaitan? Add to that, Allah said, إِنَّ كَيْدَ الشَّيْطَانِ كَانَ ضَعِيفًا. The plot of the shaitan is always weak. And he used kana, and kana is an Arabic word which indicates constantly, consistently. Kana ضَعِيفًا, always weak. The magician is a person, right? Right? And the person is وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Mankind was created weak. A weak person seeking help from a weak shaitan with a weak plan, and you turn to Allah, Al-Qawi Al-Mateen, Al-Qawi Al-Aziz, the one who has everything in the heavens and the earth is in his hands. The one who, if he wants to command something, إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَنْ يَقُولَ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُنْ. Be, and it is. All you need to do is just attach your heart like that. But then you have to realize that Allah has put causes and means for things to happen. So the sunnah of Allah is, generally speaking, that Allah gives you some steps that you have to take to achieve things in your life. Even though He can give it to you instantly. Kun fayakun, you're cured. And I know some people like that. So raise their hands, Ya Allah, cure me. Cured. Like that, instantly. Well, we had cases like that, and our shuyukh told us of cases like that, where the person said, I spent my night. I just spent my night just asking Allah forgiveness, tawbah. That's it, done. I got cured. But generally speaking, usually the sunnah of Allah with us in this life is that you've got some steps to take for anything you want. You want to have children, you've got some steps to take. You want to, be wealthy, you've got some steps to take, right? You want to achieve something in your job or whatever, you've got some steps to take. That's how the dunya is. So the same thing here. There are some simple steps that people need to take. Just start from the beginning. Don't say, I've been there, I've read Quran, I've been to the Sheikh, I did. Because everybody says that. Start from zero and start with just attaching the heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you attach the heart to Allah, that's enough. From there, tawbah, turning back to Allah, correcting yourself, and lots of dua and dhikr and so on, and then take it step by step. There'll be days where you don't have, you don't feel like you did as well as you should have. There'll be days where you did very well, because like Allah said, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. These days we give different people success on different days. Like you have some days where it's good, some days where it's not so good. That's normal. And ultimately there's a great benefit in having patience and turning back, do a lot of tawbah, a lot of istighfar, a lot of dua, a lot of dhikr, and then following a proper ruqyah plan. Following ruqyah as it should be done, as the Prophet did it, as the Sahaba did it. And inshallah, a person will not find anything from that except good.
SubhanAllah. I think because it's a part of the unseen, people tend to give it this more kind of importance, where it's just like any other test. We're tested every single day. We're driving, we're at work, with family, with, whatever it may be. And every moment of the day, humans are being tested by Allah.
For sure. وَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً. We test you with bad, we test you with good.
Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we pass. Sometimes if we don't pass, we try better next time.
That's it.
But it shouldn't really be seen as anything more than that. It's a test. And like you said, people kind of sensationalizing it, making it more than it is. We have the ability to get rid of these things and protect ourselves. And we should be content and confident in the Quran and the Sunnah.
Yeah. We should have complete confidence and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we should go and do the steps. And that's what tawakkul really is, right? When people talk about tawakkul, what's tawakkul? Tawakkul is two things. It's putting complete reliance in Allah Azza wa Jal and doing the steps that are required to achieve your goal. If you miss either of those two things, your tawakkul is deficient, right? So on one side, if your tawakkul is that you are claiming to have that reliance, but you're not doing anything, you're not taking any steps yourself, then that's not tawakkul at all. On the other side, some people are running around doing all the steps possible, but they never remember that those steps are not gonna achieve something illa bi-idhnillah, except by the permission of Allah Azza wa Jal. So when you join those two things together and you bring them both, so you're doing the steps that you need, and at the same time you're putting your complete trust in Allah, you realize those steps will not be effective without the help of Allah Azza wa Jal. On top of that, you're doing what you have to do, and you're putting your reliance and trust there. That's when a person really achieves tawakkul. And ultimately, nobody knows what's written for them tomorrow. It's not for us to sit here and promise shifa to someone in 1 hour. Like that's when you usually tend to get magicians and people like that's what they do, right? They'll say to people that come to me and I'll cure you in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and that's not true. And we should never get into that habit. But we can promise a person that if they follow the Quran and the Sunnah, they will only get good, either in this dunya or in the akhirah or in both. But nothing comes from following the Quran and the Sunnah except good.
A lot of times Shaitan is whispering, mental health, ruqyah, possession, things like this. And you said something very profound. I've told so many people since in the last podcast. I said, Sheikh, how do you know between mental health and possession? And you said, it doesn't matter. The cure is the same. And for me, that was like a light bulb moment. Don't let Shaitan kind of worry you whether it is or not. Just the Quran.
And at the end of the day, there's been many cases where I have presumed that the case was a mental health case. And then when we've delved into it further with ruqyah, we found out it wasn't. And many cases where we presumed it was a jinn shaitan related issue. And when we've investigated it, it wasn't. So ultimately, a person, the cure is the same, and the method of treatment is the same. So a person shouldn't overly worry about that, but they should let it come with time. Let it come over time. The knowledge of what's going on, that will come to them over time by the permission of Allah. Like over maybe treatment, few weeks, a few months, until things start to make sense. What's going on exactly? And a person, subhanAllah, there's cases where we've gone for a long time, and then changed completely changed my mind about what's actually going on.
Yeah.
That's something which it shows how complex these things can be, because at the end of the day, these mental health conditions and sort of psychological, psychiatric conditions really exist. They're not they're not just, you know, something that the psychiatric world put there to. They really exist. But the question is for us: is there something deeper behind that? Like, okay, somebody has, let's say, bipolar.
Yeah.
That's a genuine condition which has certain criteria for a person to be diagnosed with, and certain treatments and things like that can be taken. But ultimately, we want to ask ourselves, what's the cause of that? What was the underlying cause? Because if it is something completely natural, then that has a particular way of dealing with it. And if it is something from the unseen, there might be other additional treatments that could be used. But ultimately, Ruqya should be a part of both of those. And anyone who feels like anything from depression down to any kind of psychiatric illnesses, everyone should be using Ruqya Shar'iyya as part of their toolkit. We're not going to say you shouldn't be going to the doctor. We're not going to say you shouldn't be taking medicine, of course. At the end of the day, those things are also causes and means to achieve your goal. But we say that Ruqya should be a part of that, because if you're not doing Ruqya, you're not really doing yourself justice, because you haven't taken the full range of options that are available to you to handle that particular issue.
But Sheikh, all these things we've been speaking about in this episode, you know, they're not just for Muslims. You know, even people who are Christian, atheist, it affects everyone, right?
So this is a principle the scholars mention, and sometimes they describe it and they say, al-kufru millatun wahida. Disbelief is one religion. And what they mean by that is that the effects of the shayateen and so on, and the way that the shaitan influences people, that is common all over the world, in every place. And that's why you see magic existing in all of these different cultures. And you see even belief in the jinn exists in most of the different cultures around the world in some form or another. You know, in various different religions, almost all of the religions have some sort of reference to this in some way or another. So I think that this is something which it affects everybody. And we've seen cases, it's actually really amazing when you go. One of the things I did quite some time back, a few years back, is I went to a museum that deals specifically in the UK, that deals specifically with magic. And when I went to that museum, I actually saw magical artifacts from different religions and from different places in the world. Some of them were from Africa, some were from Asia, some were from Europe, some were from the UK. And talking about like little villages in the sort of, you know, home counties type place, these little villages and things like that had a tradition of magic. And
these are like historical artifacts.
Yeah, these are all artifacts, like documents, all laid out in this museum. And one of the things that shocked me is how common the traits were between the different things, even though some of them were from completely different places, different times. Some of them, you know, 300-400 years, some of them just 20 years ago, some of them from the UK, some of them were from, you know, the far reaches of Africa and Asia and different places. And honestly, when you looked at it, you actually just saw that there were clearly identifiable common traits between all of them. Similar sort of pictures, similar sort of words, similar sort of prayers, sacrifices and things like that. They were all being done in a very, very similar way. So that's something which is, and there are people, obviously there are, you know, very famous people who've delved into magic who were nothing to do with Islam. And even among Muslims, it's not the case that it just affects practicing Muslims or this is how practicing Muslims explain mental health issues. That's not the case. In fact, I think if you find practicing Muslims who know about this issue, they're more likely to be balanced and more sort of fair on the issue, and not be sort of the people who everything that goes wrong with them they blame on this. But they kind of see it as a balance, and they look that it does exist and it does affect people, but at the same time there are other things that affect people as well. So I think it's something that affects everybody, and it definitely has a strong presence in Christianity, in Judaism, in Hinduism, in Buddhism. All of them have strong recognition of these. Of the existence of this thing.
And if you like, even, we're not going to say within Islam, but even amongst Muslims, you know, because this is how shaitan kind of takes people away from the religion. You have people who are, they identify as Muslims that have also, got involved in these things.
Yes, definitely. And you only have to look at books published on that topic to see people who were, quote unquote Muslims who had got themselves involved in these kind of things. And again, I've met several people who've been like that, spoken to them, sort of talked to them about why they went into that and how they got into that and what, sort of advising the people to come out of it and so on. You see people at different levels. You see some people who just dabbled in it for a joke, some people who didn't take it seriously, some people who maybe even went in through the point of view of ibadah, worshipping Allah. Like in fact, like for example, there are some of the deviated groups and sects who will say to people that, you need to say Subhanallah, for example, 20,000 times tonight. And when the person can't do it, they say, look, I'll teach you a way whereby you can say it 20,000 times. All you need to do is just, and then they teach them some way of like seeking help from the jinn and so on.
This is another thing, this, when you find numbers attached to certain ibadah, like certain points of worship. Of course, some of them are in the Sunnah, which are mentioned in the Quran and the Hadith, etc. And they're validated. But what about when somebody says something like, say this so many hundred times, but it's not like legislated?
It's really important because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man amila amalan laysa alayhi amruna fahuwa rad." Whoever does an action that's not in accordance with what we've brought, it will be rejected. So the very first thing a person needs to understand is when they do something with a number that doesn't have an evidence for it within the Sunnah, the very first thing they have to suffer is their action not being accepted. So someone's just sat here and read Surah Yasin like 57 times to have done such a big effort, but then not to have it accepted because it wasn't the right number. That's not the right thing to do. So in terms of ruqya itself, there is a proof for reading an ayah once or 3 times or 7 times or as many times as you want, but not having a specific number in mind. But nobody should be being told, like for example, read Surah Al-Waqi'ah 43 times or read Surah Yasin 57 times or say Ya Qawiyyu Ya Azim like 212 times in the morning and 213 times in the evening, and all kinds of strange numbers. You have to say to somebody gives you a number, you have to say to them, do you have a proof for this number? If you don't, then I can't make something specific in the Sharia that wasn't made specific.
So Sheikh, one thing we mentioned with the ruqya, that we're not promising like quick results, but we're promising like pure results, like you said there. So a lot of people kind of looking for quick fixes. They think, put this amulet or do this, without it's I would say a bit of laziness.
Definitely. I think the thing is, the first thing people need to understand is there's no quicker fix than turning to Allah. But how quick that will be, that's in the hands of Allah. There's no quicker fix than turning to Allah. If you turn to the shaitan, you're not going to get it fixed any quicker. In fact, what you might get is a fake quick fix where you think it's fixed, but actually it gets worse after a while. But the quickest fix you're ever going to get is turning to Allah. A lot of people want the cure without the effort. You see a lot of people like that. So what they'll say to you is, that, look, if I put the ta'weed, I don't have to read anything, I don't have to do anything, I just put ta'weed on my neck and that's it. It actually doesn't work. I mean, if it works, it actually causes more problems than it solves. And it's absolutely forbidden, and it might even take a person outside of Islam, depending on what's in there, what they believe about it and so on. That's not a quick fix. That's actually, a person may end up even going to Jahannam seeking a quick fix. But that actually doesn't bring you a quick fix. There's no fix that is quicker than turning to Allah and knowing that will take whatever time that Allah decreed it to take. Why does it take a long time? This is a question a lot of people ask, and I try my best to answer. People say, well, why? Well, if Allah says kun fayakun, why should it take a long time? And that's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a wisdom in everything that He does. And from the wisdom of Allah Azza wa Jal in what He does is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees certain things to take time in order for your reward to increase, in order for your sins to be forgiven, in order for the cure to come at the best time for you, in order for you to make even more dua and get more good deeds. There are many reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees things to happen at certain times. At the end of the day, it's exactly like dua. You raise your hands, you say, oh Allah, enrich me. Isn't Allah capable of sending down gold and silver to rain down from the sky? Of course.
Yeah.
But that's not the sunnah of Allah, right? That's not how Allah
Yeah.
does things, generally speaking, with most of Bani Adam. Rather, what happens is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open an opportunity here, and you'll take some steps,
SubhanAllah.
and you'll try, and you'll make an effort, and then finally, that result. How did it happen to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
SubhanAllah, yeah.
The seerah.
Yeah, this is the thing, like, Allah knows what's best for you as well. I remember when, I had somebody who had an issue with this, and it brought them back to the Quran. They realized they was neglecting the Quran, and the whole family was neglecting the Quran. And subhanAllah, it actually brought them back to the Quran. It was actually a good thing for them. To say that a trial, we know that these trials, they have wisdoms.
Wisdom and good. And look, and I often give people an example. I say, just look at the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just look at the seerah. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is has the purest heart, the most obedience, the furthest away from anything that is wrong or haram. And yet, how long did he take to get victory over his enemies? His victory didn't come in one day. Yet his dua was answered. Allah, give me victory. One moment, kun fayakun. Yeah, it took him a period of 23 years to gain victory over his enemies before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened up Makkah for him. And Al-Fatih, the conquest of Makkah. That's because that in itself had so much good for him and for us. And that's why sometimes people need to understand that it's not about getting something today or tomorrow. Allah can give it to you today or tomorrow. It's about you taking the means, the causes, taking the steps, making dua, and whenever it's good for you, and be willing to be patient. It's not that I'm saying Allah's not going to answer me. When I make dua, like the Prophet ﷺ, he said, make dua wa antum muqinuna bil ijaba. When you are certain Allah's going to answer you. Every time I make dua and say, Allah give us shifa, I believe that dua is going to be answered. But I'm willing to have sabr. I'm ready to have sabr if Allah has decreed that it doesn't get answered immediately because of a wisdom that's with Him. I'm willing to have sabr. Even though I when I make that dua, I make it with certainty that it will be answered. I don't ever make it like, well, Allah, if you want to cure me, and if you don't want to cure me, don't cure me. Like the people when they say inshallah, like, well, Allah, inshallah, if you in shi'ta, if you wish,
it's
cure
not
me.
real, inshallah.
It's not, like, at the end of the day, it's the word inshallah when you make dua. That's what it means. It means if you want, cure me, and if you don't want, don't cure me. That's why we've been prohibited from saying inshallah when we make dua. Instead, you say Ameen, or accept it from me. And you can't force Allah to do something. You can only ask Him. But when you ask Him with determination and certainty and conviction.
Just finally, for maybe some of the non-Muslims are actually tuning in, because I'm probably going to give it a bit of a clickbait title. so for the non-Muslims who are tuning in, of course, the first advice would be to become Muslim. But if people are actually suffering from these things, what advice or what comment would you have for them?
So I actually wrote an article on my website with regard to how non-Muslims can get treatment. I think I would absolutely advise them to really genuinely consider Islam and Islamic treatment as a real option for them. And to be honest, I think that's all I can advise them on, because it's not for me to advise them about which doctor to go to or which medication to take, but it's to say that at the end of the day, this affliction you have is coming from something which is unknown to you and unseen to you. And therefore you have to go back to the one who knows it and the one who sees it, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are many ways that they can get treatment. For example, they could get a Muslim to recite Quran for them, and Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu, Sahabi, he recited Quran for a non-Muslim, and there are other companions who did the same as well. So it's perfectly permissible. They could get, for example, some of the water that's been recited over, or the oil that's been recited over, and likewise, just in the article I mentioned a number of sort of options for them, but ultimately all of those options are always going to be secondary to actually accepting Islam and really being able to truly worship Allah and truly repent and truly then engage with the treatment properly. But yes, it is possible to try to help someone, and ultimately if I see someone sincere, they come to me as not Muslim and say they're sincere, they say, look, I would really genuinely like to explore the Islamic treatment. I'll be more than happy to do my best to give them what I could give them with what I have.
Of course, to have the full effect, really, you need that
Absolutely.
iman and the, you know.
And then a person on top of that, a
yeah.
person might say, well, okay, what about if I can't reach any Muslim at all? Let me say, at the very least, perhaps you could listen to some of the Quran, you know, listen and maybe read the translation and appreciate what's being said. It's, you know, maybe we could post a link of some ruqya audio. It's not really treatment as such, but you know, at the end of the day, it's a start for somebody, isn't it?
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. You know, it's like you say, it's a big topic, and
it's a big topic.
I wanted to, you know, speak about this because, you know, I think there's a massive kind of door for dawah in ruqya. Because so many people, usually people when they're going through these big spiritual tests, even non-Muslims. I mean, I know so many people came to Islam through, you know, these type of things.
Definitely.
And you know, we encourage people to
definitely, and that's really why I got involved in it to begin with. And a lot of people, sometimes people criticize and say, well, you know, should you really be using up your time with this? Shouldn't you be busy with something more important? We say that, you know, this is such a big opportunity to call people to the worship of Allah alone, to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, whether they are Muslims who've gone astray from that, whether they're not Muslim and they're going to come to that. It's such a big opportunity. One thing I would definitely recommend is if we could post a link to a video on how to go about ruqya, how to start ruqya, because we didn't really go into too much detail on the actual process.
I'll put that in the description.
We have like a simple self-ruqya video, which is just a really basic, like sort of how to get started, just for people who are interested in that.
I mean, you have more extensive courses as well, but again, it's a lot of information.
I personally like the simple one. It's a couple of hours long and just get started, because ultimately this is
and again, it kind of it becomes borderline entertaining, not entertaining, but it's interesting, right? So you want to get straight to the. It's definitely true. The detail.
It's one of those things about which you could say bahrun la sahila lah. It's a sea that doesn't have a shore. You know, like it's you could just go forever learning about this. So it's important for people, particularly people who are afflicted or have a family member who's afflicted, to get the information they need to start right now.
Learn the basics.
Today.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Barakallah feekum. It's been an absolute pleasure.
For anyone out there, just please, you know, if you are suffering with these things, just don't lose hope. You know, subhanAllah, you know, we've learned so much in this podcast. Just go away and study, learn what you need to know, and inshallah, may,
step by step,
you know, Allah cure you.
Ameen.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh.
إنك لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء.